Welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm Sal Interdonado. The Black Knight Nation podcast is sponsored by Higher Echelon. Higher Echelon is a world-class consulting firm that trains employees in sports psychology secrets that drastically improve work performance. Founder Joe Ross is retired Army. He played fullback at Army, and he was also an assistant coach at Army, and he puts that experience to use for his clients. We thank Higher Echelon for sponsoring this podcast. We would like to welcome in a special guest tonight for our podcast, Scott Spellmon, Lieutenant General Scott Spellmon, Chief of the Engineers. Thanks for joining us tonight, Scott.
Hey, Sal, it's great to be with you. You know, I've watched your podcast. You've had a lot of talent on your screen and on the stage with you. I'm not sure I'm on the same, deserve to be on the same stage with them, but happy to join you tonight and really to talk about something we're both passionate about, and that's Army football. So thanks for having me.
No doubt, no doubt. And before we dive into Army football, your career, and what's going on right now with the Black Knights, I wanted to talk about we have a Jersey connection here. You're from Butler, New Jersey. I grew up in Vernon, New Jersey, about a half an hour away. So we had that Jersey strong connection going on tonight on the podcast.
Sal, Butler, New Jersey, back when I was in high school, had one traffic light. I think it still has one traffic light, but a great school. I played for a great coach, Jack Davies, at Butler High School, and he was a lot like Coach Young. I got to experience later on during my career at West Point. But yeah, small town roots, but grew up strong, and glad to hear you're a Jersey boy as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Butler, same with my town. You know, not too many traffic lights, rural area, and yeah, I mean, first, we usually start podcast out with how, it all started for you and how you got to West Point. So how do you go from Butler, New Jersey to West Point, New York?
Yeah, so my junior year in high school, my dad knew I was the first one in my family. I have two older brothers that went to college. My dad knew that I wanted to go to college, and on my junior year, he took me up to West Point. And I'll be honest with you, Sal, it was immediate. I fell in love with the place. I met two people that day. Coach John Seymour, who was working in admissions, I believe, back then, who later came on to coach receivers during my junior and senior year. And I met Coach Charlie Taff, who was our offensive coordinator for much of the teams in the mid-'80s. I stayed connected with them throughout the remainder of my junior year, and I just feel blessed that when I applied to West Point and went through that entire process to be able to be accepted, it was just the honor of a lifetime, and then to get to play for Coach Tapp and Coach Seymour later on, just a great honor.
Did you know that West Point was as close to where you lived when you were growing up before you took that trip up there, or no?
You know, back in the early 80s, it was about a 90-minute drive from where I lived in North Jersey. Now, Interstate 287 has been complete for some time, so it's only about an hour drive for my folks to get up there. So it compared to the rest of my classmates, it was relatively close to home. So I feel blessed in that regard.
Yeah, I grew up in northern New Jersey not knowing how close West Point was. Otherwise, I would have been to a bunch of games watching, really high-level Division I football.
Right.
Talk about your career as a football player. I was doing some research earlier today, and, it seems like freshman year, and, you wait for your chance, and sophomore year, you led the team in receptions that year. So talk about what it was like, kind of moving up on the depth chart, so to speak.
So, a great recruiting class. We had a lot of receivers come in 1982. And again, I was just one of them. And then worked real hard during my plebe year, like most, right? And got to play against some really good upper-class defensive back. I mean, Mike Williams, All-American, comes to mind immediately. And if you can get open as a plebe against Mike Williams, you're learning every day. And I just think that helped me advance when I got to be a yearling my second year, and then to make the starting lineup. We had a couple of great receivers in front of me on the depth chart. Unfortunately, had some injuries, but got an opportunity early on in that season and didn't want to miss a ball, right, to keep that spot. So that's how it got started. My sophomore year, my second year was Coach Young's first year. We only won 2 games that season. Put the ball up a lot, as you mentioned, had a lot of catches. but not a lot of wins. I think we had about 2 wins that year and 9 losses, so disappointing. And then, of course, it was after that season when we transitioned to the triple option.
Yeah, so I guess those opportunities your junior and senior year are not as much as they are in your sophomore year, but the success, you guys were able to turn the corner those 2 years, right? You were able to get to bowl games, and what was that like? What was the culture? What was the change in culture for that to happen?
Yeah, for me, I think catching passes. Don't get me wrong, catching passes is a lot of fun. It always was, but winning was much more fun in a team sport. So yeah, and so my second 2 years, I essentially became a skinny lineman, right out on the flank and trying to bust open guys like Clarence Jones and Bill Lampley, if you remember those names, and certainly Doug Black, our great fullback, running them up the middle. But Coach Young, he didn't forget. He worked in some nuances into our offense. We had a great reverse play that was pretty good in the second half of most games. Pretty reliable play to get some big yards when you needed them. And then between Nate Sassaman and Rob Healy later on, my senior year, worked in some passes as well. But it was really more about winning and finding that disciplined offense that fit our team, that allowed us to move the ball down the field.
Yeah, I'm guessing it was back then. It was similar, like option football, right? Those years, your junior and senior years, or no?
Right, and so it's a very unique offense, the triple option, something that a typical defense of your opponent does not see week after week, and they generally got 7 days to prepare for you, and so that's an advantage for us. And so that was hugely important. But I don't want to suggest it was just the offense that got us to those 2 bowl games in '84 and '85. It goes without saying we had a great defense across the board at every position. And without a great defense, we never would have won the Cherry Bowl in '84 against Michigan State, and certainly would have not beat a very good Illinois team in the Peach Bowl in '85. So all around, a very well-rounded team, a special group of coaches, and I like to think a special group of players, folks that I remain friends with for life.
Man, I'm guessing you have a lot of football memories, right? I mean, especially with those 2 years. I mean, do any still stand out today that pop off right off the bat? Because I mean, those were two. I mean, 84 and '85, like you said, with the Cherry and Peach Bowl. Those are very successful seasons in Army football history.
Yeah, I always go back to 3 games in particular, and I'll be brief, and my teammates might disagree with me. I always pick these 3 because to me they were sort of turning points for our team at the time where we were. And Sal, you remember the '84 game in Knoxville. We're playing a good SEC team, Tennessee, and we opened up that year at Colgate at home at Mikey, a good game, a solid game against Colgate, but some opening game mistakes. We go into Knoxville. And we end up with Nate and the whole offense, no time left on the clock. He engineers this 4th quarter drive, and we tie the game, right? We kick an extra point, and we tie the game 24-24, and the clock runs out. And I remember a couple of things about that game. I remember afterward in the locker room, the team was kind of quiet. I mean, we were quiet. And Carl Ulrich, the athletic director at the time, comes into the locker room, and he stands next to Coach Young, and he says, "Holy cow, we just tied Tennessee. Army football just tied Tennessee." And the locker room erupts, right? Because that, even though it was a tie, that was really a win for us. And that was just a moment where we knew this team was something special, that we could play with the bigger teams out there. And I will just quickly transition to the Air Force game later that year. So the '84 Air Force game, I want to say this was the first home game at Mikey Stadium. I remember it was a Friday night game. They trucked in lights. We didn't have lights in the stadium. And I think it was on ESPN2 or something that night. And Craig Stopa kicks 5 long field goals right down the middle. Kirk Gutierrez, our great outside linebacker, gets a tackle early on in the game for a safety, puts us up 2-0, and we run a reverse later on in that game for a touchdown. And we beat Air Force on a Friday night on TV. That was also a turning point for us. And then I'll make a long jump just at the end of my senior year, and that's the '85 Peach Bowl against a good Illinois team, right? And while that wasn't really a turning point for my class, I think that really helped set the stage for the '86 season and the '87 season and all those successful years that Coach Young had later on, and then certainly Bob Sutton had early on in his coaching tenure. So I would not single. failed to single that one out as well. A big win over a very strong Big Ten team.
Yeah, I was reading. I guess it was a halfback pass from Clarence Jones to you was a pretty key play in that game, right in the Peach Bowl.
We ran 2 halfback option passes that game. One in the second quarter. Bill Lampley threw a touchdown to Benny White in the second quarter, and then maybe the first quarter, and then we turned around and Clarence Jones threw a 25-yarder to me in the third quarter, and it was a perfect back shoulder pass. I remember running against Brian Swoop, who was the strong safety covering me at that time. I turned around and the ball was right there. CJ just had the ball right there. Catch it, fall down, 2 feet in, and it's a touchdown. And Craig Stopa kicks a field goal in the fourth quarter to put it away. But I would just go back. While we had some great offensive plays in that game, we made the plays that we had to. Our defense won that Illinois game. If you go back and look at the film and look at our linebackers, in particular our secondary, and some of the miraculous knockdowns they were making against a very good quarterback, Jack Trudeau, who went on from Illinois to play for the Colts. Our secondary played the game of their lives, and that really turned the corner in the '85 Peach Bowl.
I always like to ask, especially when we're going back a little bit in time, who do you think the best player was that you played against on the opposite team? Who you think was the best player that you ever played against?
Yeah, I remember as a plebe, I got into the Notre Dame game. This was down, and it was a terrible loss for Army. But I got to play the bulk of the fourth quarter against a cornerback named Stacy Turan. Stacy Turan went on to play for the Oakland Raiders, but got to run a few routes throughout the fourth quarter of that game. And Stacy, to me, was someone that I always kind of benchmark myself. If I can get open against Stacy Turan, I can beat anybody, right? And so he early on in my career, I always looked at him and his ability to cover receivers. It was just someone I always benchmarked myself about and always tried to work hard against, even if it was only mentally in practice.
Awesome. I want to shift gears a little bit now to the military side and after West Point, and your distinguished military career. I was reading up on today, and just to be deployed during some serious wars, if we were going to call them missions, so to speak. I mean, wow. I mean, but it seems like during that time, you get reunited with some of your Army football teammates, or no?
That's true. So I participated in Desert Shield and Desert Storm back in the early '90s, and right alongside me in the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment was J.T. Thompson, a great defensive back on the class of '86 on our team. And then later on, I had the privilege of serving as a battalion commander in Iraq. And along in our brigade combat team was Rob Rogeman. You remember Rob as a linebacker in our class, and also a very talented special teams player. And then later on, as a brigade commander in Afghanistan, I'm saying this is now 2008, 2009. I had the privilege to serve alongside Rob Dickerson. Rob was commanding our combat aviation brigade, and is certainly a great tight end on the Army football team in the mid '80s. So my Army football family has been with me throughout some of the more rewarding assignments that I've had.
Yeah, Rob Dickerson was a deputy AD, I believe, at West Point not too long ago.
That's right.
Within the athletic department. I was reading one of my colleagues' stories on you from a little bit back in the day, Justin Rodriguez. He wrote a story about how during the time you were serving in Iraq, how you were close to losing your life in that due to a road bomb. I mean, that experience has had to make. Can you talk about that experience a little bit, and maybe when something like that happens, that is no doubt life altering, but maybe do you go back on maybe what you learned at West Point or what you've learned during your time in the Army to get past that?
Yeah, Sal, it's absolutely, to answer your question in short form, and I'll come back to what Coach Young taught us about how to deal with adversity in a minute. But yes, so I was serving as a battalion commander in the 3rd Infantry Division. I was in a place called Bakuba. That's about 45 miles northwest of Baghdad. And encountered a roadside bomb and lost about a chunk of my left calf, about the size of your fist. But I was very fortunate. I had no major arteries cut. I was in operating room within an hour. So a surgery in Iraq, a couple in Landstuhl, Germany, and the rest at home at Fort Benning. But I was blessed to have my immediate family, my wife Charisse, my children around me while I healed. But my Army football family was around me as well. I mentioned Coach Seymour earlier. Coach Seymour got on a flight. He was the athletic director in a private school in North Jersey. Flew for a day down to my home in Fort Benning to spend some time with me. You may remember Ronnie Rice and Jimmy Brock. Ronnie was our
Sure.
great center, class of '86, and Jimmy Brock, our nose tackle from '87. Both of those fine gentlemen got on the road and came down to see me and wish me well. Coach Young reached out to me right away, and it's always great to hear from Coach Young. But the ones that helped me the most, I would think, was just all the cards and letters and emails from my teammates that came in, and none of them were along the line, oh, gee, Scott, I'm really sorry this happened to you. Hope you get better soon. It was all like, they were all writing me along the lines of, hey, Spellman, I bet you I can beat you in a 40-yard dash now. Right. So, and you only get those kind of notes from real family, right? And that's really what I needed to hear and to help me get back up on 2 feet again. So I feel blessed from my immediate family and then certainly from my Army football family in going through that experience.
Man, they still talk about today. Jeff Monken's a big believer in culture and a big believer in the brotherhood, and that just is a great story about brotherhood, right? Maybe getting you through some of that times. What do you see out there now with this Army team when you watch them? What do you like about them? What do you see about them? Is it their culture and how they play together? Is that part of it?
I think it is. I watch as many of the games as I can. I get to as many of them up in Mikey Stadium or when they're on the road as possible. And I will tell you, I am excited about Coach Monken's team. I really am. These players, they are fit, they are disciplined, they hold each other accountable, and they are exciting to watch. And I think what I like to see in them is that they're just mentally tough, right? They something bad happens on the field, they face a little bit of adversity, but they bounce back very, very well. And I think that's just something, the strong mentality that Coach Monken and his very strong assistant coaches have brought to this team. And I'm looking forward to a very strong season again this year.
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned is something that doesn't really get enough credit. It seems like that team in the fourth quarter is maybe at its best, and that they could even play first overtime, second overtime, third overtime if they need it. And I think the fitness of the team is really, you contribute that to strength and conditioning. You can contribute that to the players working on their own, just being ready to go, right? I mean, that's something that you're absolutely right. They've been they don't tire out at all. I mean, it's all systems go when they're on the field. So
and you just get the sense, and it's hard to put your finger on this, but just to gauge their mental toughness and looking how they bounce back from adversity, whether it's a fumble, an interception, maybe a missed tackle. What I noticed watching this is they completely forget about that, right? And they get on to the next play and trying to make something positive happen. And I've seen that over the past several years. And I know that was something Coach Young drilled into us immediately when he came to the team in 1983, and something I think myself and my teammates needed. And it's just great to see that in abundance with this current team.
It's such a cliche sometimes to move on to the next play, right? To me, it always went, as a reporter, went in one ear and out the other, but when you think about it and you're on the field, right, I'm sure like there were some times when you played where that was really important, a bounce back, an immediate answer, so to speak, right? I mean, I'm guessing that was important when you played too.
So I mentioned the 84 game against Air Force earlier on. Coach Young designed a passing play, a very rare passing play for us for that game. It was a 10-yard drag over the linebackers. And Sal, I could not have been more open. He called it in the first quarter, which was rare. And I was the closest defense back must have been 15 yards away. And Rob Healy put it right on me, or that might have been Nate Sassman at the time, put it right on me. That ball went through my hands, hit my chest, and bounced on the floor. And I just remember looking up to the top of Mikey and what just happened. And I remember running to the side. I was rotating plays at the time with Benny White. And I remember going to the sideline, and Coach Young looked at me and said, "You got to forget it. You just got to forget it. And we're going to come back to it." And now he didn't come back to that play later in the game. He did come back to a reverse, which we ran successfully for a touchdown. But It's right. I mean, that is so important. You're right. It does sound cliche, but it is so important for our players and our coaches.
No doubt. And like you said, this is an exciting year for Army. They have a lot with the COVID last year and the protocols. A lot of guys got to play. A lot of guys got to start, and a lot of guys are returning who have done that. And I don't know. I'm not really a preseason like college football rankings guy when they go 1 through 130. But I'm seeing Army like I think they should be ranked a little higher than where they are right now. I think people are maybe underestimating this team a little bit. We'll see what happens. September 4th at Georgia State, and the schedule is pretty competitive. Games at Wisconsin, Liberty, Ball State, Wake Forest at home. But man, if they can win 10 games out of this schedule, or who knows, maybe more. I mean, I think further put the program on the map. I mean, it's on the map, but maybe get it a little bit more.
Right.
Respect from maybe the Power 5 schools, so to speak.
Yeah, Sal, I saw some of the similar early reports, and I would say, look, let's give it a game or two or three, and see how we perform. I think if we do, as I feel that we're gonna perform, I think you're going to see us rise rather quickly in the rankings. I am really excited about this team. I'm a little selfish. I'm ecstatic that Coach Monken is coming back for this season. I know there was some discussion of some other options out there for him. I'm really excited. I'm really excited for this team. I'm glad COVID is largely behind us, and hopefully we'll be able to get more folks in the stadium watching these games. And I'm looking forward to another great Army football season.
I hope September 11th, Mikey Stadium is packed with fans. The core, you got Tsunami in the background. The core is going crazy. And, they've been very successful at home in the last few years,
right.
During Jeff Monken's era, pretty much, especially the last 5 years. And, wow, that would be like, especially, I know it's not maybe September 11th, right, has some meaning too. And, wow, let's just see, like, you're right, let's just see college football. That's college football at its purest, in my opinion.
Right.
Mikey Stadium and Army playing. Maybe I'm a little biased from covering the team for so long, but let's get the fans back in there, hopefully, and that's going to be an awesome. I mean, people are so right. You're so counting down the days to the season opener against Georgia State, right? But let's get that home opener too the next week at versus Western Kentucky and see, like you said, first 3 games. Let's see where they're at. And wow. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your position now as chief of engineers and kind of what that details and how you worked up to that, so to speak.
So no, Sal, thanks for that. So I spent the first 30 years of my career in combat engineer units, so working inside our brigade combat teams and our maneuver divisions. And then about 5 years ago, I was asked to come over to a very unique corner of the Army, in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So for your listeners that are not aware, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does major federal construction, right? And so today we're working across the country on hundreds of projects. We operate, we build and maintain the nation's waterways. We build major Veterans Administration hospitals. We do major construction for the Army, the Air Force, and for the entire federal government. But it's not just in the United States. We're working in 110 countries across the globe for our geographic combatant commanders on programs large and small. We're typically been about a 20 to 22 billion dollar construction business for the federal government. Last year, we did $40 billion worth of work. So under the previous administration and the current administration, the nation is investing in infrastructure. And that's the honor of a lifetime. I get to play a small part in that as the commander for the Army Corps of Engineers. We have about 37,000 civilians of engineers of all disciplines, and only about 800 military officers in the Army Corps that serve as our regional commanders. And we're in every major city across the United States. And like I said, just a huge program with a lot of rewarding work underway. So again, the honor of a lifetime to receive this assignment.
No doubt. What was the transition like from combat to where you are now? Was that at first? Was there a little bit of a transition or no?
No, a little bit. I mean, so my academic background had been in engineering, so that was not a surprise to me. But I had to learn how to lead in maybe a little bit of a different way. Of course, your leadership principles stay the same throughout, but it's much different leading a battalion formation or a brigade formation of soldiers than it is leading, a group of several hundred technical engineers on some very difficult engineering challenges that we have across the country. I had some, just like in my Army career, I had some great non-commissioned officers and officers bring me along. It's been the same in the Army Corps of Engineers with some very talented Department of the Army civilians that have brought me along in this part of my career as well. And so, as I mentioned, it's just incredibly rewarding work that we do for the nation.
Absolutely. I was checking out your bio earlier today, and if we can go back to combat for a moment, a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. I mean, those are some pretty serious medals that you've earned in combat. I mean, that stems a lot from your time in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, and so I mean this in all sincerity. I don't remember much about that part of it. I do remember the non-commissioned officers and the great officers that I was able to serve alongside in Iraq and then certainly in Afghanistan, and to serve as a brigade and a battalion commander in both of those theaters, leading America's sons and daughters. That was the most rewarding part of that for me. And we've got an incredibly talented Army, and I just feel blessed to play a small part in it.
Is there because we West Point graduation recently happened, and you have some graduates moving on to officers, some Army football players too. Is there any advice that you would give like the new grads just on what to maybe expect out of their first days as an officer, or maybe their early days as an officer?
Yeah, so I had the honor of talking to just over 100 of our senior cadets a few weeks ago, just before they graduated in commission, just the ones that were coming over to the engineers. And I just shared a few thoughts with them, and these won't surprise you. I told all of them that first, be willing to learn. And that sounds odd because they just graduated, about to graduate from the premier military institution in the world, one of the best academic institutions in the country. And here I am telling them, you've got more to learn, right? And so I encourage all of them, please listen to your non-commissioned officers, listen to your senior NCOs. They're going to teach you if you let them. And of course, as I encourage everyone, be humble, right? You're going to learn just as much from that junior non-commissioned officer over the next few years as you learn from an academic professor in the classroom. Again, if you're humble and you let them. So those were the points that I wanted to share. And I think it was well received. And I will tell you, I look forward to seeing those young men and women out in our formations here very soon after we get them through their basic leadership courses and any specialty schools that they go to.
Yeah, earlier in the week we had on Anthony Jaquin. He's an Army baseball player, third baseman. 3.9 GPA in mechanical engineering. Going to Cambridge to grad school first before he starts his military career, and I'm like, amazing, right? Like you said, they've learned so much at West Point, but yet there's a little bit more to learn down the road. And certainly he's a guy that we could look forward to as a future Army officer in engineering, no doubt. So.
And then it's not just Anthony. I mean, Anthony's incredibly talented, but I want to say there were about 60, somewhere between 60 and 65 others that are going on to do, they're cadets that are going on to do advanced graduate work before we bring them into the Army. And I think that's just a great thing, right? We just got to time their careers so we get them through all the leadership experiences that they need, along with their academic background. And because we're going to need them, right? Because we're the Army and the Army Corps of Engineers, we're being asked to tackle some pretty tough challenges across the country right now. And we're going to need all that talent and more. So I look forward, as I said, look forward to meeting all of them soon.
Is that something that they're doing a little bit more of with the grad school stuff, or no?
I think what I saw this year after talking with the superintendent, that to me that's a pretty high number. I don't think the class of '86 had that amount of graduates going on to do graduate work right away. I think that's all positive. Certainly in the Army Corps of Engineers and the Engineer Regiment, we work hard to get all of our officers to graduate school within their first 5 to 8 years of service. We want them to get their master's degree in a technical field because it's only going to serve them well in the Army or outside the Army, right? We're going to want them to have those degrees and those professional credentials to serve us down the line.
We went into it a little bit, but maybe we could wrap this up with, what was it like playing for Coach Jim Young, right? I mean, he's a Hall of Fame coach, and yes, he was able to, when he saw maybe things weren't going to be moving in the right direction, he was able to change a few things with the offense. And like you said, they had a really solid defense when you were there. What was it like playing for Coach Young?
There are four things that I took from Coach Young that I think have really helped me in my Army career. And I don't want to say just my Army career. When I'm done wearing the uniform, I'll go on and I will use these same leadership lessons from him that he taught all of us. And the first one I would say is he was always about preparation, right? So whether it was physical preparation, mental preparation, or spiritual preparation, whatever you needed, I mean, he really taught us how to put those hours in so that when the time came, we were prepared on all of those fronts to win and to perform as we needed. He also brought to us at a time, I think, when the team really needed in belief, right? Believing that you could win and really big into visualization, right? How do you want to visualize your performance? How do you visualize your performance in this next game and actually seeing yourself perform long before the game ever started? And that was another dimension that he brought that we just had, I know my class had not experienced before. I always talk about adversity. Coach Young was always big about talking about adversity, right? It's going to come. It comes to all of us, whether it's on the football field or in life. And then how do you deal with adversity? Can you do it while staying positive and true to yourself? That was a big takeaway from Coach Young as well. And then the last one, and I see this a lot in Coach Monken as well, and that is accountability. Whether it's accountability as an officer in the Army or as a player. I just remember being a receiver for Coach Young, right? It was not okay to drop a pass. It was not okay to miss a block or to misread a coverage or run the wrong route, depending on that coverage. And if you did that, you found yourself running to the top of Mikey Stadium, which I did a lot of, right, in my first couple of years playing for him. But just dealing with accountability in a positive way, because that's really what makes you as a person and your teammates better as a formation. So those are the four, Sal, for me, that I took away from my experience playing for Jim Young. And I'd go back playing for him on any day.
Nice. Scott, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Really appreciate you coming on, talking about your experiences as an Army football player and as an officer. If you're listening to this podcast, you can find this podcast on YouTube. We have a Black Knight Nation channel. You can also find us on all major podcast platforms from Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and we look forward to like we were talking about. Scott, you are a star. First off, you are a star. You talk about the other people we've had on the podcast, but it's been a pleasure to have on the Chief of the Engineers, Scott Spellmon, on our podcast, no doubt.
Sal, great to be with you and your listeners, and looking forward to a great season.